These belong to me now," Amanda declared, her manicured fingers trailing over my mother's antique jewelry box. She turned to me with a smirk that made my blood boil. "After all, I'll be the new Mrs. Harrison soon." I stood in my family home's living room, watching this 26-year-old woman brazenly claim my inheritance while my husband of 15 years, James, just stood there nodding like a puppet. My name is Olivia Harrison, and at 42, I never expected to find myself in this absurd situation. "The jewelry stays with me," I said calmly, though my heart was racing. The antique collection wasn't just gold and gems. It was 3 generations of my family's history, pieces my grandmother and mother had carefully preserved and passed down. Amanda laughed, tossing her perfectly styled blonde hair. "James already promised them to me. Didn't you, darling?" She batted her eyelashes at my husband, who couldn't even meet my gaze. "Liv," James finally spoke, his voice carrying that condescending tone he'd developed since meeting his new secretary 6 months ago. "You need to be reasonable. Amanda and I are starting a new life together. These pieces should go to the woman who'll carry on the Harrison name." I felt a strange calm wash over me. Perhaps it was the months of preparation for this moment, or maybe it was knowing what waited in the attic above us. "You're right," I said, watching their expressions shift from smug to confused. "Why don't we check the attic first? There's an old box up there you both should see." James frowned. "What box?" "I've been through everything in this house." "Not everything," I thought. "Follow me," I said, already heading toward the stairs. I could hear Amanda's heels clicking behind me, no doubt expecting to find more treasures to claim. The attic was exactly as I'd left it last week, dusty and dim, except for the antique trunk I positioned prominently in the center. It was my grandmother's, a beautiful cedar piece with brass fittings that had always been kept locked. Until now. "Open it," I gestured to James. He hesitated, then knelt before the trunk, lifting the lid with a creak that seemed to echo through the space. Inside, laid out carefully on top of yellowed silk paper, was a stack of documents that made Amanda's smirk falter for the first time since she'd walked into my house. "What are these?" James asked, picking up the first envelope. "That would be the original deed to this house," I said, watching his face carefully. "The one showing it was left to me, not you, by my grandmother. The Harrison name has nothing to do with it." Amanda snatched another document from the trunk. This is from 1952. "My grandmother's marriage certificate," I confirmed, along with the prenuptial agreement that specifically stated all family heirlooms, including jewelry, would pass directly to female descendants only. My mother inherited everything legally, and so did I. James was shuffling through papers now, his hands shaking slightly. "These are all registered with the county. Why didn't I know about this?" "Because you never bothered to ask," I replied. "You were too busy building your perfect life with Amanda to notice I've been meeting with the family lawyer for months." Another document caught Amanda's eye, a recent one. "What's this about an LLC?" "Oh, that." I smiled. "That shows how I transferred ownership of all my inherited assets into a protected trust 3 months ago. Everything from this house to the jewelry you're so eager to claim is legally secured. Neither of you can touch any of it." The color drained from James's face. "You can't do this. We're still married." "Actually," I reached into the trunk and pulled out one final envelope. "We won't be for much longer. These divorce papers are already filed. You'll be served officially tomorrow." Amanda's voice rose to a shriek. "You planned this. You trapped us." "No," I said, my voice steady. "I protected what was mine, just like my grandmother and mother taught me to do." I watched as they frantically dug through the trunk, finding more evidence of my family's careful planning across 3 generations. Each document, each legal agreement had been preserved perfectly, creating an unbreakable chain of inheritance that James and his girlfriend couldn't challenge. "My lawyer will fight this," James threatened, but his voice lacked conviction. "Your lawyer can try," I agreed. "But considering these documents have been verified by 3 different legal firms and the county registrar, I wouldn't waste the money. Money you don't have much of anymore, since I froze our joint accounts this morning." Amanda's face contorted with rage. "You vindictive bye." "No," I said, my voice steady. "I protected what was mine, just like my grandmother and mother taught me to do." I watched as they frantically dug through the trunk, finding more evidence of my family's careful planning across 3 generations. Each document, each legal agreement had been preserved perfectly, creating an unbreakable chain of inheritance that James and his girlfriend couldn't challenge. "My lawyer will fight this," James threatened, but his voice lacked conviction. "Your lawyer can try," I agreed. "But considering these documents have been verified by 3 different legal firms and the county registrar, I wouldn't waste the money. Money you don't have much of anymore, since I froze our joint accounts this morning." Amanda's face contorted with rage. "You vindictive bye." "I choose your next words carefully," I cut her off. "Unless you want the HR department at Harrison and Associates to receive the evidence of your relationship with James while you were still his secretary. That non-fraternization policy is quite strict, isn't it?" The attic fell silent except for the sound of Amanda's heavy breathing. James looked like he aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. "Now," I said, closing the trunk with a decisive click, "I think it's time for both of you to leave. My house, my rules." As they stumbled down the attic stairs, I heard Amanda hiss at James, "You said this would be easy. You said she was just a trophy wife who wouldn't fight back." I smiled, thinking of my grandmother's words written in her diary, which I found in this very trunk months ago. "A woman's strength isn't in making noise, but in being prepared when others try to silence her." Looking around the attic, I felt a deep connection to the women who'd come before me. They'd known someday another woman in our family might need protection, might need to fight for what was rightfully hers. They prepared everything, preserved every document, created every legal safeguard possible. The jewelry box downstairs wasn't just a collection of precious stones and metals. It was a symbol of their foresight, their strength, and now, my victory. James and Amanda could plot and scheme all they wanted, but they'd never understand the power of a legacy protected by generations of careful planning. I heard the front door slam, followed by the sound of James's car starting up. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time to show them exactly what else that antique box in the attic held. Secrets that would make today's revelations look like child's play. The next morning, I sat in my study surrounded by the contents of another hidden compartment I discovered in the antique trunk. My grandmother had been more clever than anyone realized. There was a false bottom containing documents that even I hadn't known about until last night. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages from James and his family. His mother, Eleanor, was particularly vocal. "How dare you embarrass our family like this? James told me everything about your vindictive behavior. We'll see you in court." I smiled, spreading out the yellowed papers before me. If Eleanor only knew what I'd discovered about her own family's past, she might think twice about threats. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Marcus, my family's longtime accountant, who'd worked with both my mother and grandmother. "I came as soon as I got your message," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "Are these the documents you mentioned?" I handed him the first set of papers. His eyes widened as he read. This changes everything," he muttered, reaching for his reading glasses. "Does James know about this?" "Not yet," I replied, "but he will soon." The papers revealed that the Harrison family fortune, the very wealth that James and his mother had lorded over me for years, had actually been built using funds from my grandmother's family. A secret loan made in 1960 that had never been repaid, complete with compound interest calculations that would make any modern accountant sweat. According to these records, Marcus said, your grandmother's family essentially saved the Harrison business from bankruptcy. They never transferred ownership of the original investment, just allowed the Harrisons to manage it. And now, with accumulated interest and the original terms of the agreement, your family technically owns controlling interest in Harrison and Associates. James' grandfather never legally transferred the shares back. I leaned back in my chair, letting the implications sink in. No wonder my grandmother had kept these documents hidden. She'd been protecting both families from a truth that could destroy everything. Just then, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Amanda. "James is devastated. His father's threatening to cut him off because of your lies. You've ruined everything." Poor Amanda, still thinking this was about her. She had no idea she was just a pawn in a much larger game. I turned back to Marcus. "How long will it take to verify these documents?" "I've already started the process," he replied. "But Olivia, are you sure you want to do this? This could destroy the Harrison family completely." I thought about James standing in our living room, watching silently as his girlfriend tried to claim my family's treasures. I thought about Eleanor's years of subtle digs about my modest background, never knowing her own family's success was built on my grandmother's generosity. They need to understand what they're about to lose, I said firmly. Set up the meeting. The next day, I walked into the Harrison and Associates boardroom, where James, Eleanor, and Amanda sat with their lawyer. Their expressions ranged from contemptuous to concerned. "This is a waste of time," Eleanor announced. "Whatever games you're playing, Olivia." I placed the documents on the table, sliding them toward their lawyer. "These might interest you." The room fell silent as their lawyer read, his face growing increasingly pale. Eleanor snatched the papers from him, her hands trembling as she scanned the contents. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Father would have told us." "Would he?" I asked quietly. Would he have admitted that his success was built on someone else's money? That he never truly owned what he claimed was his? James was reading over his mother's shoulder, his face ashen. These signatures are real." "Of course they are," I said. "My grandmother kept perfect records. She never intended to use them. She wanted both families to succeed. But you and Amanda forced my hand when you tried to take what wasn't yours." Amanda, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "I don't understand. What does this mean?" "It means," the lawyer interjected, "that Mrs. Harrison's family has legal claim to approximately 60% of Harrison and Associates. The original investment was never properly settled." Eleanor's face had turned an interesting shade of red. "You planned this. You've been planning this for years." I shook my head. "No, Eleanor. I discovered these documents yesterday in the same trunk that protected my inheritance from your son's schemes. My grandmother left us both gifts, me, the truth, and your family, decades of freedom to pretend this company was solely yours." James stood up abruptly. "What do you want? Money? The house? Name your price." "I want you to understand what it feels like to have someone try to take what's yours." I replied calmly. "To feel powerless while others decide your fate. How does it feel, James?" The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor was quietly crying. James looked like he might be sick, and Amanda was slowly inching her chair away from them both, her dreams of becoming the next Mrs. Harrison visibly crumbling. "You have 24 hours to decide," I said, standing up. "Either we negotiate terms that protect both families' interests, or I'll proceed with a full legal claim. Your choice." As I walked out of the boardroom, I heard Amanda's voice. James, maybe we should take a break." I smiled. Phase 2 was complete. The antique box in my attic hadn't just protected my inheritance, it had revealed a truth that would force the Harrisons to face their own lies. And there was still one more secret to reveal. The final document from my grandmother's trunk sat unopened on my desk. The envelope was marked to be opened only when all else fails. After yesterday's boardroom revelation, I knew it was time. My hands trembled slightly as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter and a single photograph that made my heart stop. It showed my grandmother standing beside James' grandfather, William Harrison, both young and smiling. They were holding hands. The letter began, "My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, the Harrison family has forced your hand. There's one final truth they need to face." A knock at my door interrupted my reading. It was Eleanor, looking decades older than she had yesterday. "May I come in?" she asked, her usual imperious tone replaced by something almost humble. I gestured to the chair across from me. She sat, her eyes fixed on the photograph in my hands. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "It was in my grandmother's trunk, along with this letter." I held up the pages. "Would you like to know what it says?" Eleanor's hands clutched her designer handbag so tightly her knuckles turned white. He was more than just a business partner, wasn't he? According to this letter, your father-in-law and my grandmother were in love. She loaned him the money to save his failing business, but his family forced him to marry someone else. Your mother-in-law. Tears rolled down Eleanor's cheeks. That explains so much. Why he was always so kind to your family, why he insisted on maintaining connections even when it made no business sense. I continued reading from the letter. William and I made a pact. The money would remain unofficially invested, and both families would be protected. But if his descendants ever tried to harm mine, the truth would come out. James needs to know, Eleanor said quietly. This might be the only thing that will make him understand. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from James. We need to talk. Alone. I agreed to meet him at our old spot, the garden pavilion where he proposed 15 years ago. When I arrived, he was already there, looking lost and defeated. Amanda left, he said without preamble. Said she couldn't handle the drama, couldn't handle being part of a family built on lies. Ironic, I replied, considering she was helping you live one. He winced. I deserve that. I deserve all of this. But what I don't understand is why my grandfather would leave us vulnerable like this. I handed him the photograph and letter. His hands shook as he read, his face growing increasingly pale. They were in love, he whispered. All this time, our families were connected by more than just business. Your grandfather wanted both families to prosper together, I explained. He never intended for these documents to be used as weapons. That choice was forced by you and Amanda. James sat heavily on the pavilion bench. I've ruined everything, haven't I? Not just our marriage, but my family's legacy too. Not yet, I said. There's still a chance to fix this. Not our marriage, that's over, but the legacy both our grandparents tried to protect. How? We restructure the company, equal partnership between both families, just as they originally intended. We honor their vision instead of fighting over control. James looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. You do that. After everything? I'm not doing it for you, I said firmly. I'm doing it for my grandmother, for your grandfather, and for the legacy they wanted us to preserve. Over the next few weeks, the restructuring was finalized. The Harrison family learned to share control. Amanda disappeared to chase some other wealthy prospect, and Eleanor became an unexpected ally, helping to implement changes that made the company stronger than ever. The antique box in my attic had held more than just legal documents. It had contained a love story, a business empire's true origins, and the key to healing decades of hidden wounds. My grandmother had known someday these truths would need to come out, and she prepared everything perfectly. One evening, as I sat in my study reviewing the final partnership agreements, Eleanor knocked on my door again. I found this in William's old desk, she said, holding out another photograph. It showed my grandmother and William Harrison in their later years, still standing close, still sharing a secret smile. They never stopped loving each other, Eleanor said softly, but they chose to protect their families instead of choosing themselves. We owe it to them to do better. I nodded, understanding finally why my grandmother had protected these secrets for so long. Sometimes the truth isn't meant to destroy. It's meant to rebuild, to restore what was lost, to remind us of the love and sacrifice that built our foundations. The jewelry box still sits in my living room, untouched by Amanda's greedy hands. But now it represents more than just my inheritance. It's a symbol of two families brought back together by the very secrets that could have torn them apart forever. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in destroying your enemies, but in forcing them to face the truth they've been running from all along.